Hi guys, it's Mark Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Mark Zicree of Space Command. And sadly, today we have to note the passing of Leonard Nimoy, but we're also going to celebrate his life and talk for a few minutes about what made him great and why he affected us so deeply, and perhaps share some memories with you of my experience regarding Leonard Nimoy and perhaps uh, a common experience we all had of him. So let me start at the beginning. It was the mid 60s, and an artist named James Bama, who would later become very famous but was not famous at that time, was hired to paint several posters to promote the coming fall season on NBC. And he painted posters of shows that were already on the air, like Bonanza, but he also painted a poster that was for a show that hadn't aired yet and that I hadn't heard of. And and these posters were used as still images in 10-second commercials to trumpet the coming fall season on NBC. And this is back when you couldn't pause frame something on TV or go back or record it or anything. It came and went. And commercials at that time were a minute long. And so to have something come on for 10 seconds, it was like it was instantaneous. It came and went before you knew it. And so the first time I saw it, I was a kid, and it came on, and I said, what was that? There was this guy, this sort of handsome guy in the foreground, and there was a planet in the background, and what looked like a very strange spaceship whizzing around that planet with flame coming out the back of it. And in the background, there was another guy. And it was just a flash. I said, wow, could that guy have had pointed ears? And so each time I started waiting for that commercial and watching for it. And every time it came on, I would scoot close to the screen. I would peer at that guy in the background. And yes, amazingly, he had pointed ears. It's like, well, what's this going to be about? And it's like, coming in the fall, Star Trek. And I knew I was going to have to watch that show. I was going to have to look at that show, and I was going to have to pay attention to that guy with pointed ears, whoever and whatever he was. And so the first night Star Trek debuted, and it was an episode called The Man Trap by George Clayton Johnson, who also wrote for Twilight Zone and also co-wrote Logan's Run. And that night, it was about a creature that craved salt and it was a shapeshifter, and it could drain the salt out of people's bloodstreams and kill them. And Mr. Spock was introduced. And from the moment I saw him, I was just entranced. He was an amazing character. And in that episode, he gets attacked by the salt vampire, and he's urging Dr. McCoy to kill it. And he's just, very immediately he was commanding, he was intelligent, he was interesting, he was logical, and he was unlike any of the other characters. And week after week on Star Trek, which immediately became my favorite show, Spock was the one I was paying attention to, because Kirk wasn't like me. Kirk was, a different girl every week, and he was brash, and he was commanding, and he took the initiative, and he was just impulsive. And I was a science fiction fan, and like many of us, most of us probably, I was an observer. I was brainy. I was uncertain in the world. I was trying to hold back my emotions and try and be calm in a world that I didn't quite understand. And Spock, I identified with that guy. And he was always slightly awkward, slightly out of place. He was the ultimate outsider because he was half Vulcan, half human, not at home in either world. He had strong emotions, but he was trying to be intelligent. He was trying to be a rational being in an irrational world. And but he was also stronger than anyone else. And in a certain way, he was better than anyone else. He held to a higher moral code. He was determined to be ethical. He was determined to be brave and noble and loyal and honorable. And, Kirk was not as good a friend to Spock as Spock was to him. Kirk was not the kind of guy I wanted to be. But Spock was definitely the kind of guy I wanted to be. And the first season of Star Trek, when I was a kid, I read an article about Leonard Nimoy's birthday, and I mailed him a birthday present of a scrapbook. And this is 1967, and he was kind enough. He must have typed it himself. It was on Desilu stationery, and it had typos, and there was no initials of his secretary. So I imagine on his lunch break, he sat down and he typed me this letter, and it's before they even had the Star Trek stationery. And he sent me a signed photo of himself as Spock and that letter on Desilu stationery, which I've saved till now. And you can go on my Facebook page, and you can see that photo and that letter. And I just had this sense of connection to Nimoy, connection to Star Trek, and I was so grateful that he took the time to send it to me. And later, I was given a Christmas present of a trip to the Star Trek set, and I hoped that Leonard Nimoy would be there. But that day they were shooting a scene with DeForest Kelley and William Shatner and Majel Barrett in sickbay, and so I got to see them in person, but I didn't get to see Nimoy. But even so, year after year, I wanted to grow up to be Gene Roddenberry. Now I'm running Space Command, and I have my own studio, and I'm making stories that are very much in the Star Trek tradition, and it's a hopeful vision of the future, and that's what Star Trek and Spock gave me. And Leonard Nimoy wasn't an actor of great range, but every now and then, if an actor's lucky, they find their great role. And Leonard Nimoy always had that sense of holding back, of stiffness, of restraint, of almost an uncomfort, not being comfortable in his skin, holding himself um, very, very stiffly and very, very correctly. And later I learned that at that point he'd had something of a drinking problem, and he smoked, sadly, which led to the chronic disease that ultimately he died of, or at least he was thinking that. And so maybe at that point he wasn't very comfortable in his skin. Maybe at that point he wasn't fully who he grew to be. And that came across in performance, but in a very positive way, in a very good way. And 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 so he may not have been the greatest actor who ever lived, but he was the greatest actor who ever played Spock. And he was a great Spock. And it made him a great icon. Originally, he was going to be the secondary role, but very quickly the fans gravitated toward him, and he became an equal lead to William Shatner, which, of course, William Shatner, I'm sure, wasn't very happy about. But it's the same as David McCallum in Man from U.N.C.L.E. But Spock became the great icon of Star Trek. And it's fascinating to me because I've thought about this. Because when I wrote and directed World Enough in Time, the Star Trek episode with George Takei that you can watch on my website, markzicree.com, I got to write the character Spock, even though Leonard Nimoy didn't play that role. Jeff Quinn did wonderfully well. And but I got to think about Spock a lot and write that character and see that the character was a romantic in his way, and charming and funny and witty and bright, and really just totally admirable in every way, and willing to be an outsider and brave enough to be an outsider. And I was thinking about Spock's character the other day, and I realized that Leonard Nimoy always played Spock more as a Vulcan and less as a human. The human was underneath. The human had very strong feelings, but the Vulcan was keeping those feelings in check. Zach Quinto, who plays Spock in JJ's movies, he's much more a human than a Vulcan. He's much more emotional. He's much more wearing his heart on his sleeve. And I prefer Leonard Nimoy's performance. I think Zach Quinto is doing a good job, but Nimoy was the great, great job, was the iconic job. And so it was so much fun also to watch Nimoy continue the role over decades. Thank God they brought Star Trek back in the 1970s as a series of movies. In 1979, we have George Lucas to thank for that, the success of Star Wars, and to see Nimoy in 1979 come back to the role 10 years later. And the theatrical cut didn't have the great emotional moments of Spock, but they put them back in for the director's cut, and we can see the wonderful arc of Nimoy as he struggles, as that character struggles to find his place in the world, and ultimately Spock's journey to become more human and embrace humanity more, his human self more, and come to be comfortable in his skin, and come to be at ease with who he is. And I think Leonard Nimoy came to be very comfortable in his skin too, and very comfortable in his role, and recognizing at the end of his life, and certainly throughout his life, that he had done something worth doing as Spock and as Nimoy. And then throughout the Star Trek movies, ironically, I was just watching Star Trek VI before Leonard's passing, and I'm really glad that JJ decided to use him in the Star Trek movies, because again, I think it's a great coda to have him in those films. And so we get to journey through Spock's life thanks to Leonard Nimoy, and through Leonard Nimoy's life as well. And I have the treasure of that letter from him and the photo from him, and I just, he's very much with me now. These wonderful characters who teach us how to be in the world, who teach us how to be ethical people and moral people, and not be afraid to seem smart or be smart, to aspire toward greatness and brilliance. And I think Spock was a great exemplar of that, And DeForest Kelley, Dr. McCoy so obviously loved Spock as much as he needled him all the time, and he represented that great over-emotionality, and Spock would bring him back down to earth, literally. And so I'm just very, very glad that we got this great show, that Gene Roddenberry saw how to do it, and he brought those brilliant writers aboard, Ted Sturgeon and Harlan Ellison, etc. And Star Trek was a great cast. All the characters extremely different from each other. Wonderful actors, all of them. And And thanks to this wonderful medium of television and film, we got to share it with them. We got to experience, uh, whenever we want, the marvelous work they created and what they stood for and what Leonard Nimoy stood for. And millions of us are better people for having Leonard Nimoy in our lives, and having been taught by Nimoy and by the character Spock how to stand in this world and to be ourselves and to aspire toward greatness and goodness and hope and build a future worth living in. So live long and prosper, Leonard Nimoy and all of us. He will live long and prosper in our hearts and on the screen. And until next time, this is Mark Zickery, Mr. Sci-Fi. Like, share, spread the word, do all the things you do. And again, thank you, Leonard Nimoy, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.